What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Mailari. So in today's episode, I'm going to give a breakdown of what an expansion draft would look like in the NBA if one were taking place this summer. This past March, the NBA's Board of Governors approved the exploration of potential team expansion in Las Vegas and Seattle. So basically, I'm doing this expansion draft as if it were taking place this coming offseason, although an expansion draft would probably take place ahead of the 2028-2029 season with the way things currently stand. The expansion fee is projected to be around $8 billion per new franchise. One thing I do want to note is I'm doing this expansion draft based on Spotrac, which you can go on Spotrac.com, and they have a whole entire page about a potential expansion draft of what it would look like this summer and who would be protected and who would not be. Spotrac essentially projected who would be protected and who would not be protected in an expansion draft this summer. So I basically took their set players that were being protected, and then the players that weren't protected, I basically did a draft for between Vegas and Seattle. Some rules per Spotrac for the expansion draft that I'd like to highlight as guidelines. Existing teams are allowed to protect up to 8 players. Players eligible to be protected are players who are not on expiring contracts and restricted free agents. Teams must expose at least one player, and teams may not lose more than one player in an expansion draft. So to start out, I gave the number 1 overall pick to Vegas, and I have them taking Tyler Hero, who was not protected by Miami in this Spotrac simulation. Tyler Hero averaged 21 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists this past year for the Heat. He has 1 year remaining on his contract, which in this case would be the 2026-2027 season, so the season coming up after this one ends. He's on the books for $33 million for the next season, and is currently only 26 years old. It seems like parting ways between Hero and the Heat is likely going to happen at some point soon. He's still a great bucket getter and still on the younger side. In my opinion, he would be the first pick of the expansion draft. Based on who Spotrac protected and who they didn't, I think Hero would be the first overall pick. One thing I want to note is when I made this expansion draft simulation, this was probably sometime, I would guess, towards the end of the regular season, so sometime in early to mid-April. Now, if you go on Spotrac.com, it's a little bit different on there since now Tyler Hero is an expiring contract, so he wouldn't be able to be protected either way by Miami. So this expansion draft I did was, as I said, done during the regular season when Tyler Hero still had a full season left under contract and some change of this past regular season. So right now he wouldn't be eligible to be a protected player either way because he is on an expiring contract. So some of these players here wouldn't be protected anyways anymore because some of them are on expiring contracts. I do just want to note that circumstances have changed now, and Spotrac may have taken that into account already when they did this, but I want to highlight I did this simulation a month ago. Now for the second overall pick, I have Seattle taking Zion Williamson. He has 2 years remaining on his contract at $42 million for the 2026-2027 season and $45 million for the 27-28 season. Zion's still only 25 years old. He played in 62 games this past season, the second most for him in a single season, averaging 21 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists off 60% shooting from the floor. He won't help a team shooting the ball, but he can grab boards, play defense, and can slash and get to the bucket. I think he would be a good number 2 pick here in this draft. And one thing I want to note is this wasn't a snake draft on Spotrac, so essentially it goes Vegas, Seattle, all the way down the line. So Vegas now is the 3rd overall pick, and I have them taking Jonathan Kuminga, who averaged 12.4 points per game in his 5-year career so far, alongside 4 rebounds and 34% shooting from 3. He has a club option for the 2026-2027 season of $24.3 million. He's still only 23 years old, has a ton of talent. I know things went sour between him and the Warriors, and that's why they traded him. And Atlanta obviously has an option now of a club option for next season. He's a great player. I think there is still a ton of potential that he hasn't fully displayed yet. So I think he would go high in an expansion draft. So I have him going here 3rd overall. I'm very high on Kuminga. I think he's a very good player. And I think his best basketball is ahead of him. I think he can surprise some people and take a real step up next year and be right back in the mix as one of the best young promising players in the NBA. Now with the 4th overall pick, I have Seattle taking Luguentz Dort. I'm not a Lou Dort fan. I think he plays dirty and plays recklessly on the basketball court. But in an expansion draft right now, and this, like I said, I probably did this expansion draft a month or so ago. But in an expansion draft right now, he has value as a 3-and-D piece. and is also on a decent contract, 1 year remaining at $18.2 million. So I do think he would be picked in this draft. At number 5, I have Vegas taking Cody Williams. I wanted Cody Williams to be even higher in this draft. He's still only 21 years old, was in his second season this past year after being the 10th overall pick. I would not be giving up on him and his potential. He has the ability to go for 30 points any given night, as we saw this past year in Utah. This dude is a bucket and is underrated. Has 2 more years left under contract at $6 million and $7.7 million. He is definitely worth a roll of the dice for any team in an expansion draft. At number 6, I have Seattle taking Wendell Carter Jr. He averaged 12 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists this past year with 1.4 stocks per game for the Magic. He's still only 26 years old, is reliable, and that's an important position for an expansion team to have, is a good big man who could stretch the floor and also shoot the three. Carter did improve to 32% from 3 this past year. He has 3 years left remaining on his contract at around $18 to $19 million per season. So I have him going here at 6th overall. At number 7, I have the Vegas team taking DeAndre Ayton. Originally, I had them taking Jakob Poeltl, but he did struggle this past year. And the more I looked at his numbers, I didn't think it made sense for Vegas to go and get him. So I have them taking a younger player in DeAndre Ayton, who is an $8.1 million player option for next season. He averaged 13 points and 8 rebounds with 1 block per game this past year for the Lakers. He's still only 27 years old. The biggest issue here in the expansion draft is that there were not many available options at center. Domantas Sabonis is on too hefty of a contract, $45 and $49 million each of the next 2 seasons. He's also been injury prone, although he is an all-star caliber big. So I would not be shocked if he were taken in an expansion draft if one hypothetically happened this summer. With that being said, there is, if I remember correctly, there is a salary cap of what they could have in an expansion draft for total salary. And I think it was around like $130 million. So if you do go get Domantas Sabonis at $45 million, he's basically a third or a fourth of what you could spend overall as a team. Next up, we have Seattle taking Dennis Schroeder at 8th overall. He averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists this past year for the Kings and the Cavs, off 33% shooting from 3 in the regular season. He put up 18 and 7 in 23 games last year in Brooklyn. Still capable of being a starting point guard, but as a backup point guard, he's a very good option off the bench. I know he's been a little bit inconsistent for the Cavs this playoffs, but I still think he's a good player, and he only has a cap hit of $15 million in each of the next 2 seasons, which isn't bad for a guard that has starting potential. At number 9, Vegas takes Julian Champagnie, who averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds, off 38% shooting from 3 this past regular season for the Spurs, making 68 starts. He played in 82 games in each of the last 2 seasons, which is very reliable. He's only 24 years old, has a club option of $3 million next year, which is an absolute steal. I was shocked to see the Spurs not save him and protect him, but it makes sense. They have a very young roster and a lot of good players, so Spotrac did not have him protected. At number 10, I have Seattle taking Jordan Walsh, who has a club option of $2.4 million next year, which is an absolute steal. He did only average 5 points and 4 rebounds this past year for the Celtics in 68 games, but he did shoot 38% from 3. He's only 22 years old. He's young and still has room to grow, in my opinion. I think he would go on the higher end of an expansion draft. At number 11, I have Vegas taking G.G. Jackson. G.G. is an absolute stud. He averaged 12 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist of 33% shooting from 3 and 1.4 stocks per game in 55 games this past year for Memphis, making 28 starts. He's still only 21 years old. He legitimately may be the best valuable piece that you could get in this draft at number 11 overall. I would say the best value pickup you can get in the entire expansion draft. He has a ton of unlocked potential. Shout out my guy ClipK74. Big Clippers fan. Definitely go check out his YouTube page. He's the one that told me about G.G. Jackson a few years ago, and he's absolutely right. G.G. Jackson is an absolute baller. I think he has a lot of really good basketball ahead of him. He has a $2.4 million club option for next season, which is an absolute steal. Now at number 12, I have Seattle taking Bradley Beal. I know he did miss most of the 2025-2026 season for the Clippers with a hip injury. Only averaged 8 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists in the 8 games he played. It was a tough injury, but he still could be a good bucket getter, especially on an expansion team. He has a $5.6 million player option for next year. I don't think that's a bad pick at all there for Seattle. There is a lot of upside with Bradley Beal. He could still be a 20-point-per-game scorer if he can stay healthy. That is a major question mark, but it's not a bad roll of the dice for an expansion team here in this draft. At number 13, I have Vegas taking Malik Monk, who averaged 13 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists off 40% shooting from 3 this past year for Sacramento. He did average 17 points and 6 assists in the 2024-2025 season for the Kings. He's still a quality starting shooting guard, even though he came off the bench this year for Sacramento and even played point guard at some times, which that team definitely needs a point guard, which I think they will address in the draft. Monk is making $20 million and $21 million each of the next 2 years. Still 28 years old. He is still a good bucket getter. At number 14, I have Seattle taking Ryan Nembhard, who has a $2.15 million club option for the 2026-2027 season. He's only 23 years old, averaged 7 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists off 36% shooting from 3 this past year for the Mavericks. He's a good player on a cheap contract. I like the way he plays. At number 15, I have Vegas taking D'Angelo Russell, who has a $5.7 million player option for next year. He did just turn 30 years old. He's currently on the Wizards, but he didn't play for them after being traded midseason from Dallas to Washington in the Anthony Davis deal. He averaged 10 points and 4 assists this past year for the Dallas Mavericks. At number 16, I have the Seattle team taking Kevin Porter Jr., who is on a $5.3 million player option for next season. He's only 25 years old. He averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists of 32% shooting from 3 this past year in 38 games for the Bucks. That was a big bounce-back season there for KPJ. I have him being selected here at 16th overall by Seattle. At number 17, I have Vegas taking Day'Ron Sharpe, who averaged 9 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists this past year for Brooklyn with 1.5 stocks per game. He's only 24 years old, has a $6.25 million club option for next season. He's a good player, has some high upside. I think he'd be a good pick here for Vegas. At number 18, I have Seattle taking a shooting guard in Isaiah Joe, who is currently on the Thunder. Pretty shocking that he wouldn't be protected, but at the same time, it makes sense with how many players that Thunder team has to protect. Just like the Spurs, there are going to be good players that go unprotected. He has an $11 million contract for each of the next 2 seasons. He's averaging 11 points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist this past year in 71 games for Oklahoma City, making 9 starts, shooting 42% from 3. He's a good player who's careful with the ball, doesn't turn it over much, and could shoot. He would be a very good value pick here for Seattle. At number 19, I have Vegas taking some depth at the center position. I have them taking Jake Huff, who has a $2.6 million contract and a $3 million club option for the next 2 seasons. He averaged 10 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist this past year for the Pacers with 2.4 stocks per game, making 1.9 blocks per game, which is very impressive. He's an underrated player, good production on a cheap contract, still only 27 years old as well. This is a very good pick here for Vegas. At number 20, I have Seattle also adding some depth at the big man spot, and I have them taking Paul Reed, who averaged 8 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist of 33% shooting from 3 this past season in 65 games for the Pistons, making 11 starts. He only has a $5.6 million cap hit for next season, and that's honestly very good considering he's 26 years old and can still give you quality minutes, whether it's off the bench or potentially as a spot starter in some moments where your big man's hurt. I like the way Paul Reed plays. At number 21, I have Vegas taking Marcus Smart, who has a $5.3 million player option for the 26-27 season. He averaged 9 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists of 33% shooting from 3 in 62 regular season games for the Lakers this past season, making 54 starts. He was very important for them, especially early on in the playoffs this year. He showed that he can still be a very good player on a good team. He averaged 1.8 stocks per game this past year, which is very good. He's still a very good defensive player. 32 years old now, but I like the way Smart plays. He would be a good pick here for Vegas. At number 22, I have Seattle adding some scoring potential off the bench, and I have them taking DeAnthony Melton, who has a $3.4 million player option for the 26-27 season. He averaged 12 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists of 29% shooting from 3 this past season for the Warriors, playing in 49 games, making 24 starts for Golden State. Melton's still a good bucket getter, great off the bench, solid starter if needed, where you have a guard that's hurt and you need somebody to step in. He could do that for you. He'd be good scoring depth here for Seattle. And then with Vegas' last pick here at the 23rd overall spot, I have them taking Mohamed Diawara, who is a restricted free agent from the Knicks. I tried to refrain from taking restricted free agents since they can leave in free agency, but Diawara is a very underrated second-round pick from last summer's draft. I was shocked to see him not protected, but at the same time, it makes sense with the Knicks' current roster and the fact that they have so many guys they have to protect, and he's a guy that really didn't play much this past year. He averaged 4 points, 2 rebounds in the regular season. I think he can be better than that if given more opportunities. He's only 20 years old, from France, who has produced a lot of NBA talent recently. I try to not take restricted free agents, but I think he's a good player and has some good upside. And also at the same time, if I remember correctly, which, like I noted, this was over a month ago, I think Vegas was starting to run out of cap room, so I had them taking a restricted free agent since there was no cap hit there on what they can spend. And then number 24, to round out the expansion draft, I have Seattle taking Justin Champagnie, who has a $2.6 million salary for next season and a $3 million club option for the following season. He averaged 9.6 rebounds and an assist of 32% shooting from 3, 1.5 stocks per game in 69 games for the Wizards this past season. He's a solid player, only 24 years old. It can be a good depth piece for an expansion team. I like him going here to Seattle at 24th overall. And now for a breakdown of the rosters, I think when you look at these rosters overall, I think the Vegas roster is much better. But you guys can let me know what you think. The Vegas roster, this is their starting lineup. I have Malik Monk at point guard, Tyler Hero at shooting guard, Cody Williams at small forward, Jonathan Kuminga at power forward, and DeAndre Ayton at center. And then off the bench, I have small forward Julian Champagnie, point guard D'Angelo Russell, point guard Marcus Smart, power forward / center and Day'Ron Sharpe, center Jay Huff, power forward Gigi Jackson, and small forward Mohamed Diawara, who is a restricted free agent. And then for Seattle, I have point guard Dennis Schroeder, shooting guard Bradley Beal, small forward Lou Dort, power forward Zion Williamson, and center Wendell Carter Jr. as their starting lineup. And then off the bench, we have point guard Ryan Nembhard, shooting guard DeAnthony Melton, small forward Justin Champagnie, power forward Jordan Walsh, point guard / shooting guard Kevin Porter Jr. I think he's more of a shooting guard, but I know he can bring the ball up and play point guard, and he did have some good assists this past season. Shooting guard Isaiah Joe, and then center Paul Reed. I really had fun doing this expansion draft. Like I said, it would be different today because when I did it back in April, guys that were on expiring contracts weren't considered expiring contracts at the time on Spotrac, since there were still some games left in the regular season, if I remember correctly. But this was fun just to look at what it would look like an expansion draft had what happened this summer. Obviously, we're still probably a few years away still from what happening, but I think it would be exciting and fun to follow as an NBA fan. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.